Extra in, honourable members, distinguished guests, it's absolutely delightful that so many of you are able to come along today and join us for this event. It's a celebration of a number of things. Firstly, of course, it's a celebration of our history, and this portrait will ultimately join a long line that you've seen in the chamber many, many times, I'm sure, of former speakers. And it also celebrates the role of the speaker. The role of the speaker goes back to 1758 on the Isle of Man, and before that it was called the Chairman of the House of Keys. But it is a role as old as Parliament itself, and as the world's oldest continuous Parliament. It's a great honour to follow in that line. It's also a privilege to have been elected twice to that role now, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for placing their trust in me in doing that role. It's also wonderful to have two former speakers. The entire cadre of living previous speakers have turned out, and we'll check in again at the end of the speech, shall we? And what perhaps makes it special, because having your portrait done is not a by any chance normal thing at all. It's a special privilege, and I share that privilege in one respect with Mr. Brown, who's lurking away in the corner. The fact that we both grew up in public sector housing on the Isle of Man and went on to become Speaker of the House of Keys says, I think, a lot about the representative democracy we have, and also the social mobility on this island. That means that that is something that is a possibility here that I don't think you'd find in many other places in the world. It's also an opportunity today in front of witnesses to thank my parents for that great start in life and helping get where I am today. They are responsible for all my attributes. My flaws, however, are entirely my own, except my sense of humour. You've got a lot to answer for, Dad. Certainly, as you've gathered, not one of the landed or moneyed families, as you'd have seen up on the wall in the House of Keys, and I'd like to thank my wife Helena and my children for making sure that's going to continue to be the case for the foreseeable future, but also for their support over the years, which has been invaluable as a member of the House of Keys, as we all know. So, enough about me. The other part of this celebration is about the real talent that you've seen here today in Andrew Tift's work. He is, as you can see for yourself, a fantastic artist, and he has painted such luminaries as Tony Benn, Ken Livingstone and Eric Sykes, so there's absolutely no wonder that he has won the prestigious BP Portrait Prize. He has worked absolute wonders with some very dodgy material, but it's fantastic to see the detail that has come through in this every single part of this painting. It's absolutely spectacular. And one of the few advantages of lockdown was we had this sitting where about 500 photos were taken, went away, and then all of a sudden the world went into lockdown, and Andrew had nothing better to do than paint me for about 6 months. So the world's loss was most definitely my gain. And so I would like to ask Andrew to say a few words and perhaps ask why on earth he would take on such a job as this in the first place. But if, ladies and gentlemen, I could ask you to welcome, a big Manx welcome to Andrew Tift.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me and my wife over today. It's lovely to be back on the island again. It's always an absolute pleasure for us. I'd like to excuse the notes because I'm not a great public speaker, but I'll be talking to you more freely about my work afterwards. But just for this, I would like to say, first of all, thank you for choosing me to do this portrait. It's always a great thing to have work in an ongoing collection that's going to be remembered for many years to come. It's nice to think that they're still going to be around there in 100 years' time and looked after very nicely. The whole sitting began in Birmingham when I flew over from Birmingham Airport. It was in kind of late February 2020, and there was a lot of sort of rumours about this COVID-19 floating around, and one or two people were wearing masks on the plane, and then a few weeks later everything shut down. So luckily I got in just before all of that happened to us all. So I arrived here and I went to the came to the legislative buildings and had a sandwich and had a little look around everywhere. All the old spaces and all the new spaces all gelled into one. I met Juan, and he was much younger than I'd expected, and I have painted quite a lot of elder statesmen in the past for the House of Commons or the National Portrait Gallery. But he was actually younger than me by a good 10 years or so.
I'm younger than I look.
which I hadn't expected, and I said to my wife, just the other week, you know, you're getting older when you're older than the Prime Minister. Or maybe not, more recently.
Check in on a daily basis.
So we chatted, and I could recognise that Juan had got boundless energy, he got lots of interests, and he was the chair of lots of societies and groups. And he was very interested in the military and accountancy and the Freemasons, but above all, he was a very strong and committed to the islands community and a very proud Manx. So I noticed that he got a real sense of humour as well. That was the one thing that really stood out for me when we were sitting in his office having a chat. Lots of references to people like Lord Flashheart from Blackadder. He's always very formally dressed, and I was always intrigued by a man that owns no pairs of jeans and how he could live a life without a pair of jeans. So he was always very well presented. And also, I noticed that he was wearing a Timex Indiglo watch, which is something that I'm very obsessed by as well for some reason. So we toured the legislative buildings and had a look at all the different places where we could go. And we tried out lots of different compositions, mainly in the central area. So we looked at spaces behind those brass bars there on the platform, over in the corner, in front of the speaker's desk. But then we finally decided to position Juan right in the middle, so we moved the chair into the middle of the House of Keys, right at the centre of where all the proceedings go. And everything started to work fantastically. So the chair was in synchronisation with the stained glass windows there in the background. The lighting was fantastic, the expression was just right, and the composition really started to come together. And I knew that I wanted to use the chair quite a bit in the painting as well, and we tweaked it a little bit. So some of the carvings are different to the original. So I've put 2016 in there, which is when Juan became Speaker. Then we've got the military coats of arms there, and we've got the Freemasons coats of arms as well there. And we just reached a point where, at that point, we reached a point where I thought everything's working perfectly and we've nailed it, basically. So I was taking lots of photographs to make the painting with. We took about 500. And Juan was really patient throughout the whole proceedings, because it was a long day, really, wasn't it?
You had to listen to my jokes and you couldn't
listen
go
to
anywhere.
that. So we just reached a point where I felt that we'd really nailed it, and I was absolutely happy. But it didn't happen until right at the end of the day, and right at the end of that Saturday day. And then we got to about 5 o'clock, and then we went for a couple of pints of Old Kells over at the pub across the road. And that was the end of that. So there you go. There's the painting.
Thank you very much.